We're live now.
There's on the side. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Hey, you're sporting a new look.
Yeah, I know. Razor
I
broke.
like it.
The cat died, the razor broke, all those things, man. You know?
The razor broke just perfectly to get around a perfectly shaped goatee.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it's a good look. You know what I did yesterday? I
you picked
I
morel mushrooms.
no, no, I did not. But I was grooming my dog. I have this little clipper with a vacuum attachment, and I totally sucked up a huge piece of my hair. So we both have a new look.
Okay, good.
As people get on here, we want to welcome you to Grounded. Katie Phang, the Katie Phang, is joining us here in about 10 minutes. And so we just thought we'd get on, go over some headlines, get some thoughts from our favorite seven-fingered farmer, John Tester, about what's going on. You have anything you want to say before we start?
Well, I mean, I know you're probably going to get into this, but the Iran thing is insane on all sorts of different fronts. And I don't know if you want to go there, we'll just go there right now.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, let's go there.
the fact that our intel, from what I've read, show that they weren't close to a nuclear bomb. The fact that Bibi, from what I've read, was in trouble politically in Israel. The fact that we tend to get into wars that we can't get out of. Um, the fact that, quite honestly, one of the first things the president did when he got into office was get in a fight with Ukraine and tell them that they started the war, and then undo USAID, which means, it's all coming, it's coming to light. I didn't realize this, that the MAGA base wanted to be isolationist, but they absolutely are. They do want to be isolationist. And so you get out of Ukraine, you quit helping people that need help. Um, and now they're talking about bombing in Iran when in fact they weren't close to nuclear weapons, is what the intelligence says. And then you see Taiwan sitting out there, and if you don't think other countries are watching this dynamic, you're in a different dream. I just I don't know. And then you put on top of that, the president fires a lot of political people and replaces them with a lot of his military people and replaces them with political appointments. It makes me believe that we're not in a position to do much right now. But I don't think that's going to stop the president from uh, doing things that don't make any sense. And to pile on top of all of that, the president needs an authorization for the use of military force from Congress before he even goes in and does any of this stuff. So, this is a very
I was going to
dangerous
ask
time.
you about that. I figured you
Yeah.
had something to say about that.
Well, I mean, the truth is that bad behavior begets bad behavior, and the authorization of use of military force, which I believe was signed when I was in high school, and it's kind of been ignored for a lot of these wars since then. Is something that we need to pay attention to. This is Congress's job, not unlike the tariffs, not unlike everything else that Congress needs to be doing, but continues to shirk its duty. And I know, Tim Kaine's always out there pushing that in Congress, and I think he's right. And Congress needs to have a debate whether this is the direction the country wants to go.
Okay, so did you see the video with Tucker Carlson and Senator Ted Cruz?
I did. It was.
Thoughts?
I mean, it shows the isolationist part of the Republican Party, and it shows the hawkish part of the Republican Party, if you want to say that. But I think that anytime you start talking about going into a military conflict and spending money and putting lives on the line, there ought to be a debate in Congress, and it ought to be a healthy debate, and there ought to be votes to make that determination. But
Yeah, we're certainly seeing a lot. I mean, we're seeing the president kind of do what he does. Like, I don't know. I might not. I might not. First, he said, no, we didn't have anything to do with these attacks. It was all Israel. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the same thing. But then he started putting posts out on social media saying, well, we now have complete and total control over the skies over Iran. And we see that Laura Loomer, one very close in his circles, turning on people who are critical of this, and we see other people like Steve Bannon coming out against the idea of us getting involved, saying we can't do this again. A lot of people bringing up, the weapons of mass destruction thing from the war, the second Gulf War. So yeah, there's a lot to follow, but it's definitely highlighting what I see as a fracture within the MAGA base over who to side with.
Well, look, and I think it weakens this country. By the way, if you don't have good, well laid plans based on factual information, you tend to support people whose political future was in doubt. And I think that's why Bibi did this. Look, I don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. They had a chance to keep Iran from having a nuclear weapon when they passed the JCPOA back in 2014, I think it was, maybe 15. But since it was something that was done in the Obama administration, they immediately ripped that up. And what are we looking at now? We're looking at dropping bombs in Iran. There's not a lot of forethought put into what's going on here, and I don't trust our ability to have any sort of vision. I don't trust our military leaders to understand what's going on, because he's canned the ones that did do that. Now there are probably still some good folks in there. There's a lot of good folks in the military, but the truth is that's what happens when you politicize the military. That's what happens when you get rid of your leadership and replace it with your political allies. That's what happens when you have military parades down the streets of Washington, instead of tending to the business of keeping this country safe.
Okay, so let's switch gears here. Today is Juneteenth, a federal holiday that commemorates the end of slavery in the United States, and it only became a federal holiday in 2021 under President Joe Biden. But because of the rollback of diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, across the federal government, CNN's reporting that several areas have now canceled or scaled back celebrations. And I'm curious to see what else we see happen throughout the day today.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the communities want to do that, I guess that's up to the community. In the end, I don't think diversity, equity, and inclusion are dirty words. I think they're things that help make the country stronger. I think differences of opinion are a positive thing. I think good, healthy arguments and good, healthy debate helps keep this country strong. And I think if you get everybody that thinks the same all the time, I think it's very, very dangerous. And so, look, I get it. The president thinks he's right all the time. This is a guy that's, he's he's went bankrupt 6 times. So that in my book itself shows that he's not right all the time. Nobody's right all the time. Not even you, Maritza. But I've talked to Gunner. He tells me. Okay?
No, you're right. I am not always right all the time.
But if the communities want to roll back on this stuff, I guess they can. I don't think it's something that people should be intimidated on. I think that, like I said, I think diversity is good. I think it's good for the country. I think debate's good. I think the only way you get good debates is if you have diversity of people who don't necessarily, have the same thought on every damn issue that comes down the pipe.
Well, and since when why would celebrating the end of slavery be looked at as a bad thing?
Well,
I think that was like one of the highlights of this country was ending slavery.
yeah, I mean, look, and we had a war over that, 160
Right.
years ago or 50 years ago. The president's renaming all the bases after, Confederate leaders who tried to overthrow this country. I don't get that. I don't get any of that. But in the end, like I said, the DEI stuff is kind of silly, because the truth is, I think diversity, inclusion, equity is important. I don't think people should be given a break in hiring because of that. I think they ought to be assessed on their own point of view. But the truth is, different points of opinion are very, 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 very important.
And if we fold in what we're seeing happening too with a lot of these ICE raids and the immigration detentions. More public officials being manhandled here. We see New York City Controller and mayoral candidate Brad Lander was arrested this week. That's after he linked arms with somebody that they were trying to detain. Of course, we saw the handcuffing of Senator Alex Padilla at that Kristi Noem press conference, the charges against Representative LaMonica McIver. And as we talk about this on Juneteenth, I saw somebody post something, and it's so right on, a question about Rosa Parks. Because as they correctly pointed out, she was breaking the law. She was breaking the law when she refused to give up her seat.
Yeah, yeah. Look, don't get me started on the Padilla thing. And I did see the
Oh, let's
video
get you
of
started.
the
Let's get
mayor.
you
No, no. I
started.
mean, the truth is that there was no lunging at the podium, and the Secretary of Homeland Security knew exactly who he was. She can say she didn't. She can say that he didn't announce who he was. He did announce who he was, and the fact that he was pushed out of the room uh, like a common criminal, by the way, and cuffed, thrown on the floor and cuffed with no apologies whatsoever by anybody in this administration is a bunch of shit. And the truth is that there should be apologies. There should be people that get fired over this. But no, that's not the way it is. And the truth is that that's not how people operate that are professionals. Very unprofessional. Very absolutely inappropriate. And and I mean, I thought Alex Padilla handled himself very well. For those of you guys who don't know Alex Padilla, he's a big man. He is a big man. And I'm sure if he'd wanted to put up a fuss, there'd have been people flying all over that room. But he didn't. And he ended up getting thrown to the floor like a common criminal when all he was doing was trying to do his job as a United States Senator and get some questions answered, which is not this administration absolutely does not have any transparency, and they don't answer any questions as to why they're doing what they're doing. And it's just that's not why you elect people. You know, I'm very critical of Congress because I think Congress has uh, not done their job for the last 5 months, and people can argue even before that. But the truth is that for this to happen when the guy is just trying to do his job is absolutely unacceptable, and people need to be held accountable, and none have been. And by the way, no apologies have been issued. None, none. I
Carol's
guarantee you, if
asking.
that would have been done by the Biden administration, or if that would have been done to Kristi Noem, I guarantee you there would have been all sorts of hell raised.
Carol's asking, are you glad you're not serving in Congress during this hell? I'm going to let Katie Phang in while you answer that question.
Well, I just say, look, I've got a damn good life where I'm at right now, and we're going to be catching a little rain this weekend, so farming is good right now. Uh, but the
And
bottom
you're a podcast
bottom
bro now.
bottom been a broadcast bro, and I get to work way too often with Risa Giorgio. But the bottom line is that uh, I wouldn't mind being in a fight, but I ain't going back. I'll tell you that.
Hey, we're going to fold in the Katie Phang into the conversation. Good morning, Katie. Thanks for being with us.
Well, good morning to you guys. Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
man,
we
you're coming
can.
in loud and clear.
We were
Awesome.
just talking about Senator Alex Padilla and that whole
Oh,
spectacle that went down with Kristi Noem. And I was going to ask Senator Tester, but I wanted to get you on the call. But you can enjoy his answer with me. What would it have looked like if that was Senator John Tester being handcuffed on the floor instead of Senator Alex Padilla? What would that have looked like?
would that have actually made it to the floor is really the question, right?
Well, they'd have probably used equipment on me like stun guns or worse, and and I mean, I've got to tell you, I thought Padilla was incredibly reserved through all
Yep.
that. I thought he was incredibly reserved, and for the right wing news stations to say, "Oh, this is a political stunt," that's bullshit. Just like it's bullshit that everybody's getting paid to be out on No King's Day, just like it's bullshit on all this stuff. These guys don't listen to the American people, and that's where the problem is arising from. And when they figure that out, maybe they'll start listening because they get some good ideas. Anyway, you're not on this to listen to me rant and rave about stuff. We got you on here because we're gonna just grill the hell out of you, Katie
Ooh,
Phang.
I love it. I'm ready.
Oh.
I'm usually the one doing the grilling. I'm usually the one doing the cross-examination, so I'm ready.
Well,
I'm like
think
fair, ready to go.
it's an
you
unfair
feel
fight, I'll
free.
just tell you. Unfair
You
fight.
feel free to throw those questions back at us, though, Katie, because this is I'm excited for this conversation. There's a hell of a lot to talk about. I mean, like, I was thinking about you are so on top of everything, and you're doing these. You are, and you have been. I mean, she did these incredible social media videos during the whole Trump trial. Where she would break it down in a minute, which is incredible. Everything that happened that day. And now you're doing this video series called Wait a Damn Minute and pointing out, but like how do you stay on top of it all, and how do you condense it all into really not only like informative but highly, highly entertaining videos for people?
So I'll take informative any day of the week. That is an honor, and it's such a compliment. But I will enjoy the entertaining adjective part of what you just said, Maritza, because look, I am about to turn 50 in a few weeks. And the reason why I bring up my age is so that you guys can all say that I don't look my age. And I will be very grateful for that.
You don't.
flattery
Took the
as
words
well.
right out of my mouth.
Thank
The
you.
words right out of my mouth.
But no, the reason why I bring it up is I think to the senator's point, we need to evolve constantly. And part of that evolution is the acknowledgement that the consumption of information these days is not traditional anymore. We are hanging out on Substack right now, right? I just did a Substack live with my great friends at The Contrarian. I will have a few YouTube videos going up later today on my YouTube channel. I enjoyed my run at MSNBC. Grateful for the opportunity to have the Katie Phang Show. But fundamentally, the reality is people are getting the information on TikTok, YouTube, Substack, Instagram. They are not getting their information in the traditional sources anymore. And so the ability to condense information into a minute plus, so that somebody can say, I can still live my life. I don't have to sit there and pick and choose my work or my focus on my family, but I can still get the information that makes me what I call a high information American. If we can deliver that, then we are truly doing a service. And so it is, I always say, like drinking from a fire hose. And of course, I get criticized about why are you focusing on this or why are you bringing attention to this? And to them, I say, one, we can walk and chew gum. And two, there's only so much time in the day that we can cover certain material. And so I'm trying to cherry pick, which I think is the most relevant for all Americans. Don't always hit it out of the park, but I do think that these opportunities to be able to give information, and look, I don't give a shit if you agree with me or not. It's what I'm telling you. And a lot of times it's my take, and you don't have to agree with me, but that's America. And that's the irony, right? For all those haters out there that love to send me stupid shit, here's the reality. You get that luxury because you live in the United States. But if you want to live in a Donald Trump America, you won't have that luxury. It'll just be like North Korea or Cuba. So guess what? Enjoy your opportunity to say stupid shit.
So it takes me longer than a minute to ask a question. Okay, Katie. So, but I want you to answer this question that I'm going to take 2 minutes to ask in a minute. So there's a lot of things this administration does, like Medicaid's a prime example, that impacts a lot more than just the people who get Medicaid. On due process, which very few people even know what the hell that means. Can you tell me why due process is important in this country for a dirt farmer in north central Montana or for a business owner in downtown Manhattan? Why is, or a worker that's working for General Motors, why is due process important?
So there's so many concepts like due process that we probably just grew up in school hearing decades ago, right? And for many of us, the concept of democracy has been something that we've just taken for granted. These are things upon which foundationally we've had this privilege of living here in the United States that we just kind of assume are always going to be there because why? They've never had to be challenged. It's that thing like until you actually suffer something, sometimes you don't realize what the loss is, or sometimes you have to personally experience something to understand why it is so important. And frankly, due process remains an elusive concept to people, but it's something that applies to all Americans. And more importantly, it applies to all people on United States soil. And it's come up often in the immigration context. But to your question, the reason why you should care, even if you are a United States citizen, born and bred in the United States that lives in Montana, for example, right? The reason why you should care is it's the opportunity that is guaranteed to you to have your voice heard. Simple. It doesn't make a difference what the issue is. It doesn't make a difference the forum within which it's occurring. It is your opportunity to be heard, which is why in the immigration context, we are saying and reminding people that you do not have to be a United States citizen to have due process. It's afforded to you by the United States Constitution, and it is something that is given to you when you're on United States soil. So the absence or the stealing of due process from people that are being stolen off the streets and summarily shipped off to third countries that are not even their home countries, that's the reason why we talk about it now in immigration. But I'm grateful for the fact that we're having the chance to talk about due process because, again, I think it's something that people don't even realize they have until they actually lose it. And then they realize that it's something that they should have been able to have in the first place.
I think it's the same with democracy, too. It's one of these terms that we grew up with. Like you said, you learn about it in school and you know it's important. But how often do we actually think about the potential we have to lose it until recently?
We take it for granted, right? It's this idea of having and it's funny when I was a prosecutor and I would do DUI cases, right? For example, in Florida, having a driver's license is a privilege; it's not a right. So, I like to remind people that we live in a country where we have certain privileges, but more importantly, we live in a country where we have certain rights. And so the right to due process and to have due process, that's not a privilege, that's a right. And I think people need to realize that those are very different concepts.
But Katie, here's the question. And we have asked this question, I don't know, every episode. Like, we don't see members of Congress on the right in general stepping in to say, whoa, 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 you can't do that. We talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's shipped off. There's no due process. We don't even know. I mean, there were so many people in a batch shipped off, and we didn't even know their names for days. I certainly didn't see any charging documents for a lot of those people. And then we have, these temporary protected statuses being ripped away from people who have been here legally. We saw this video of this Afghan man explaining to police, I worked as an ally, as an interpreter for the United States. I'm here legally. And they're saying, well, that's gone now. We saw something similar happen in Whitefish, Montana earlier this year. So as people are seeing this stuff happen and violation of our Constitution and ripping due process away from people, and yet they're not, the officers detaining are saying, I'm not showing you my badge. They have masks over their face. We see the, controller in New York City being arrested for linking an arm with somebody. What can people do? What can people do to actually stand up for our United States Constitution without just being manhandled by the authorities?
Well, there's no guarantee that anything that you do is going to protect you from being manhandled, roughhoused, slammed to the ground, as we saw with Senator Padilla. But there is something that he did say in the speech that he gave on the Senate floor yesterday, which was it yesterday? My days are blending into each other. By the way, that's the terrifying part about being in this administration again. He said something which was noteworthy, which was, can you imagine what tens of millions of Americans lifting their voices in protest is able to do? I think that we are being kind of thrust back in time to be reminded of the efficacy and the power of protest. I feel like there was been kind of like a lull in time where there were certain moments in history where protests became the manner in which our voices were heard. And yeah, I think the most kind of recent, most notable one would be after the murder of George Floyd, right? I mean, there was a very powerful kind of moment where people said, we cannot stand for this. And so for Senator Padilla to say, no one is going to save us but us, I think that is really the answer to your question. I can tell you what the legal ramifications are. I could spend hours walking through, statutes with the both of you. But when we're living in a regime where those things are being ignored, the only thing I can tell people is you have to continue to uplift your voice. But I also am a fair person when I say, it doesn't mean that you have to go and protest, though. Your form of protest can be something different than going out in the streets. I completely understand and empathize why people would be terrified to go out in the streets. And yet, look what happened on Saturday during those No Kings protests. More than 10 million people out in the streets of our United States saying, we're not going to stand for this. And in large part, what ended up happening? In large part, a lot of bad stuff didn't happen. But then what did Trump do? Well, Pete Hegseth just yesterday authorized an additional 2,000 National Guardsmen to be sent to the LA City area. That's their reaction. But it wasn't like they're like, we're going to dispatch another 50,000 Marines, right? I mean, there is a legal process that it's winding its way through the courts. But I do think Americans need to realize that just one voice in combination with others is going to move the needle. Look what's happening with that big bullshit bill of Donald Trump. People are complaining. There's chips in the armor right now. And I think people need to continue to do that. But I understand it is exhausting to constantly be living in a climate of fear and outrage, which is why the amazing thing that you guys do here on your podcast and everything else that everybody else is doing, I think collectively is making a difference. So I always want to remind people it's making a difference. You may not feel like it's palpable, but it's certainly moving the needle.
And Katie, I just want to point out to you that I am a farmer by trade, and Maritza is a journalist by trade, and her question was longer than mine. I just want to point that. Okay.
Yes, it was. It was longer.
All right.
There's just too much. There's just too much. I mean, like really, how do you stay on top of it all, Kate? Like, what does your morning routine look like?
I want to know how you get your news, because the truth is there is a lot of bad news out there. There's stuff out there that people put out. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes they're retweeting it because they believe it. But where do you go to get news that you can actually say, you know what, this is really what's happening?
So I will tell you, it's a survey of news gathering on my part. I think I guess the universe, God, whomever you ascribe to, figured out that I don't sleep a lot. So I do constantly, I'm constantly, I won't say doom scrolling, but I'm constantly getting my information off the internet. But I'm also old school. I still physically read publications, but I kind of read everything and it kind of across the gamut, but I'm not going to certain things. Sometimes I go to things that I know have a certain slant, like the Washington Examiner, for example, or even shit like the Daily Caller, just to see how crazy they are today and just to see exactly how distorted stuff can be. But generally speaking, I try to stay within the lanes of even mainstream media sources, which is why I like to tell people I love independent media, but you can't count out mainstream media still. I mean, sometimes the stories are breaking on mainstream media, right? They're not necessarily breaking on independent media. So don't discount or discredit those as being still sources that are reliable. Look, we may not love what Jeff Bezos did, right? But there are excellent reporters at the Washington Post. We may not love what the New York Times does, or even the Wall Street Journal, right? But there's still excellent reporters and journalists that are there, and they are sometimes breaking the news that independent media is relying upon to be able to share to their followers and their viewers. And so I think we need to have a healthy dose of skepticism on both sides. But if I can briefly share an anecdote, yesterday I had the luxury of catching a cup of coffee with my husband. We both kind of work for ourselves. And so we jokingly were saying we were cheating on our bosses by going out and getting a cup of coffee in the afternoon. But we went and we were in the store and I met a young man who admitted to me, because he asked me what I did. He's like, he goes, I'm admittedly, he goes, apolitical is the adjective he used. And he's like, and I don't really know a lot. He goes, so I'm kind of embarrassed to admit to you. I said, why are you embarrassed? He's like, well, you seem to be, really on top of this stuff. And I said, look, I do it, because I am genuinely interested, but I also do it for my job. But I asked him, I'm like, do you have any questions? Like, do you kind of want to know what's going on? And you know what he brought up to me? He brought up the Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz interaction, but he didn't know who they were. He had no idea who they were. So I said, well, tell me what you found to be so compelling about it. And this young man, his name was Kevin, he said, I thought it was embarrassing for the guy who couldn't answer the questions. So I said, well, let me tell you who those people are. And I told him who Tucker Carlson is, and I told him who Ted Cruz was. And I said, look, I have my own personal opinions and derision and feelings about those men. But I will say that I'm not above admitting that Tucker Carlson did a very good thing. Tucker Carlson did a very good thing by challenging Ted Cruz, who does have a total bee in the ear of Donald Trump about this issue in Iran. I said he did a good thing by challenging Ted Cruz to have to answer basic fundamental questions that Ted Cruz should have known. But I said, but how much does it scare you, though, Kevin, that Ted Cruz has the ability to influence what Donald Trump does? And he looked at me and he was like, it's terrifying. I said, yes. And I said, so that is the reason why we in independent media should be able to, A, say, let's give credit where credit is due. Tucker Carlson did do the Lord's work when he sat there and challenged Ted Cruz. But B, we should also say to ourselves, why is something like that not happening with Donald Trump directly? Why do we not see that happening more directly with the person who is literally has his finger on the button, right? But it was fascinating to meet him. He was probably in his mid-20s. I didn't ask him his age, but it was one of those gut checks, guys, when it comes to there's a swath of Americans that either choose to not be in this kind of information cesspool that we're swimming in on a daily basis, or you know what? He's just genuinely just doesn't really know what's going on. And I loved the fact that he was willing to have this conversation, though.
It's such an important point to remember that people do not consume information and news the way the three of us do. And we have to remember that. And I always talk about that when we talk about, like, why are we here? How did we get here? It's because people weren't watching every single rally of Donald Trump, and people weren't listening to every single policy proposal. They just thought, like, oh, he's like me. He tells it how it is, or whatever it may be.
Well, I'm sorry. The thing is, he said it showed up on his feed. So something about his algorithm made that show up. And it could have been because it was going viral. So that's something else we need to think about. The more people that are pushing out the information, bots or otherwise, that's how this young man who's apolitical is getting his information.
Yeah, the other thing that I would just point out is that, this country's been around for 250 years, and I think everybody thinks that it just kind of happens. And it's painful to watch the goddamn news right now. I mean, it is painful. It may be painful for some people to listen to this Substack interview. I don't know.
I'm sure it is.
But the truth is that, would I rather watch a baseball game or catch some NBA playoffs? Yeah. Why? Because now you get to watch people, box with people around on a basketball court, and you don't have to listen to somebody talking about due process at hell. What's that mean? You know what I mean? It's just, it's crazy. Let me ask you a question that Maritza's going to ask, but I'm going to beat her to it. I mean, we have seen the actions this president's taken. We've seen the lack of actions by Congress. We've seen some of the actions taken by the court that has been ignored. Others haven't. Are we in a constitutional crisis in this country?
Yes. It's not that we're on the verge. We're there. We're there because the level of disrespect of the Constitution shows us that the co-equal branch of government is not respecting the equality of that co-equal branch of government. The one thing that I will push back on my own answer is the following. We know, though, that there's still some measure of respect that is being afforded to our judiciary, for example, because the lawyers are still going to court. I know that sounds so dumb, but it's the reality. You'll know when we are in a full-blown dictatorship when the Trump administration doesn't send its lawyers to court anymore. When the lawyers are not going, when they are wholesale not participating in the judicial process, you'll know that we're done. In the meantime, the battles continue to be fought in the courtrooms, which is why I always rail against the group of lawyers that I call the enablers. Those lawyers that work for Donald Trump, either in his civil capacity, his personal capacity, the government, whatever, that they are the weapons that are used by Trump to be able to push out his ammunition. And if they did not do that, then you know what? He wouldn't have the access that he needs to be able to get to the courts to get, to get things done sometimes that he does. But I do think that it's not just the lawyers, it's the whole bunch of people that are just enabling his agenda. But the frustrating part is a lot of us sat there, present company included, and warned that this was going to happen. It's ironically the one thing you have to give him credit for. He said, I'm going to do this, and he's turned around and done this on steroids, right? So, it's like you want to talk about, I guess, maybe the appeal of him. He did speak plainly about what he was going to do, and that's why it's kind of irritating sometimes. It challenges my humanity sometimes because, especially in South Florida, a lot of people are getting, deported, kidnapped, seized. And some of them were like, oh, but I voted for Trump, or, oh, Trump promised he wasn't going to do this to us. And there's an immediate part of me that's like, yeah, well, this is the find out part of what, was going to happen. But then I have to stop myself and say, there's so many people that are innocently being swept up in this, that are being harmed. And so I have to just kind of check myself and make sure that my humanity is intact. That's the thing that we can't lose. We can't lose our humanity throughout all of this, because it's so easy to fall into the trap of almost like relishing the misery that's happening to people that voted for him. I don't like those people that voted for him, but we can't relish in the misery that's being afflicted upon them because it's also happening to the rest of us.
We're seeing it in so many things too. I mean, I know, like the tariffs. How many times have I heard a small business owner say, "Well, I didn't vote for this. I didn't vote for this." And you are right. This is the find out part. Um, I I just wonder, when you talk about lawyers, you've been around lawyers a long, long time. Like, do they know? Do the lawyers who are coming to his defense know better, or do some of them actually believe, oh yeah, he's totally within his right here. This
So
is totally legal.
they all know better. They all know better. Some of them flirt with the propriety of it. The thing that's been appalling are these lawyers that are going to court and being so disrespectful to the judges, that are saying, I didn't have to listen to you because you didn't put it in writing. I mean, totally outrageous shit like that. But there's also a camp of lawyers, for example, line prosecutors at the Department of Justice, that are, Pam Bondi sends out a memo saying if you don't do something, you're going to be disciplined, investigated, or fired. I think it's easy sometimes for people to say, well, then just quit your job. But for some people, it's not that easy. And so I think that we need to be kind of measured in the way that we dispense our judgment about these things. Some people have a mortgage and children and a family that they have to support. Some people need the benefits. Listen, I left MSNBC May 1st and I didn't have a golden parachute. A lot of people don't know, but I was in the midst of a contract and I had 10 months left of my contract and I left. And, one of the first thoughts was, okay, I need to find health insurance.
Right.
And, there are things that inform people's basic day-to-day decisions, and we need to be respectful of that. But I do think, though, it is fair game to criticize people, especially the lawyers who do know better about what they're doing. But then you see people like Alina Habba and Emil Bove and Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi, and I could keep on going. And they are materially rewarded for their loyalty. And it disgusts those of us with decency, but we see it happen. And so sometimes it's just the instinct of self-preservation. If I go along, am I going to be okay? But we saw what happened to the Nazis. So I just want to remind people, we've seen what happens when people just go along with orders, and what happens.
If they know better. I mean, that's a foundational issue, and I hope they do know better, by the way, because eventually maybe something will turn around in them, and whatever motivates them, they'll understand that there's a higher motivation here. Let me just ask you this, though. I come from a pretty red state that is, if the election was held today, I think Donald Trump would still win by 20 points, truthfully. These are not bad people. These are people that actually believe that Donald Trump is doing a great job in the presidency. They're not like the 25-year-old that was in the coffee shop. They actually do watch news. Most of it is slanted towards Donald Trump's view, but they're watching Fox. Let's just put it that way. And that's what they watch, and that's what they watch all the time. How do you approach them? Because I don't think they're evil people. I think they're people that just have a totally different view of what the hell's going on in the world than I do. And so how do you approach them to talk to them about why they should be concerned when they really aren't?
So you asked the question that plagues me all the time, because some days I wake up and I think I'm never going to peel off a Republican who supports Trump, and maybe it's a waste of my energy to try to do it. But then I have to stop myself because, to your point, they're not all bad. Some of them are legitimately bad, but they're not all bad. And I think what's interesting is the Democrats, for example, the Big Tent, Big Tent, Big D Democrats, right? So the Democrats also run the spectrum in terms of being Democrats. Some people that are Democrats are like, those are too progressive Democrats. Those AOC, Bernie Sanders, Ilhan Omar's, they are way too progressive. There's some people that say that. Then there's some people that say, but we're not progressive enough. Look, we haven't been progressive enough, and that's why we've ended up where we are. What's fascinating about the Republicans is it's so difficult sometimes, John, to be able to say that there's a subset of Republicans with whom that we could be having a conversation. And let me be clear, I used to be a registered Republican until 2016. And then I voted for Hillary Clinton, became an independent NPA, and then I became a Democrat in 2018 when Donald Trump stood next to Vladimir Putin in Helsinki and said that he didn't believe our intelligence communities. That was the day I became a Democrat. Because that was abjectly terrifying to me.
But by the way, he just did that again with Iran, with his own appointee to the DNI.
Oh, well, Tulsi Gabbard has her own freaking baggage. So, the whole alleged Russian asset kind of thing. But I agree. He just did that with Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, the fact that she's like, oh, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of the biggest deal that we're on the verge of a nuclear conflict. But I think it's difficult sometimes to look at the Republicans now and say that there's a subset of Republicans with whom you can have these conversations. That's a really hard part for me. And I want to go back to the Ted Cruz, Tucker Carlson example. Ted Cruz, I'd welcome a conversation with him. Let me tell you. But Ted Cruz is never going to have a conversation with me. He's never going to have a conversation with me. And it's funny because Ted Cruz, is he supposed to have a conversation with me if I'm on Fox only? Or is he only going to have a conversation with me if he thinks that I'm down the middle? I mean, that really shouldn't be the case. He should be willing to sit down and have that conversation with me. Now, I know Ted Cruz isn't just a person, who's in a red state that voted for Trump, but I struggle with the Trump voters because they've had 3 chances. 2016 Trump voter, you're in a different class. But if you voted for him in 2020 and 2024, I don't really know what our common ground is anymore. That is my problem. What is our common ground? Other than the fact that the people on Fox and some of the Republicans have successfully hijacked narratives that belong to all Americans. I am going to sit here and tell you, as a registered Democrat, I don't want violent criminals in my country. I don't give a shit if you're American or from another country. I don't want you in my country. So I have no problem if you are a violent criminal getting the hell out of my country. Well, why is it now the narrative that Democrats are gang-loving criminal lovers? No, not the case. I was a prosecutor for half my career. Trust me, I put bad people in jail and prison. It's things like that. What? Because because I'm angry at what's happening, that I'm un-American now. I mean, it is a very difficult thing to find the common ground. And I think I agree that we are extremes on both sides of the aisle, but I truly struggle on how to answer your question in terms of trying to find a conversation point that I think would resonate with somebody who's voted for Trump, especially 3 times, a 3-time Trump voter.
I want to just add something that I heard Governor Kasich say yesterday. And that is, and it might go to those 3-time voters that you talked about in 16, 20, and 24. And I hear this as I go around the country. What do Democrats stand for? What are the 3, 5, 10? Pick a number. What are the things that Democrats stand for? So that one thing about Trump, you knew what he stood for. You may not agree what he stood for, but he did make it pretty specific, as you've already pointed out, what the hell he was going to do when he got into office. And he's done that on steroids, is 100% correct. But the question is, what do Democrats stand for? And what Kasich said was, and then who is the person that you would say, yeah, that's the person I would vote for president of the United States, that the Democrats put forth? And trust me, anybody they put forth is going to be tripped and torn to shreds by the right-wing media. There is no doubt about that. They're going to be misrepresented. They're going to be say they're crime lovers. They're going to be said all this stuff, or criminal lovers, I should say. And so, but the question is, that's a reasonable point. If people don't know what Democrats stand for, do they vote for, even if it's bad, the person that is at least pretty clear what they stand for?
So I think part of that is a messaging problem, but I can answer your question, or I
Sure.
can answer John Case's question, which is Democrats stand for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I'm not being glib, but that's exactly what they stand for. I think what's happened is there has been a cherry picking of certain issues that the Democrats are fighting for that have now become kind of the banner waving headlines that are being attributed to Democrats. But I agree with you, the second part of your analysis, which is, no, I cannot decidedly point to one person right now. Actually, I take it back. I do. I'd point to Pete Buttigieg. I think Pete Buttigieg has the temperament, the experience, the intelligence, the education to be able to do the job. But speaking bluntly, I don't know if America is prepared to elect a gay man to the White House. To their folly, I don't think they're prepared to do it. But that's not a reflection of me. That's a reflection of where the United States is right now. But I think the luxury that the Democrats have is the luxury actually have a pretty deep and wide bench of people with whom they can rely upon and put forth to be able to represent the party. I do think the Democrats suffer from an infighting problem that happens that the Republicans have figured out. The Republicans circle the wagons. They may not ultimately agree, but the circling of the wagons on the part of the Republicans is incredibly impressive. Incredibly impressive. Because when push comes to shove, they'll back that candidate come hell or high water. And I think the Democrats need to take a page out of that playbook from the GOP.
And if you don't, you're pushed out. I mean, I remember walking around the Republican National Convention covering that for Scripps with Governor Asa Hutchinson, and he was nervous about how he might be received. And some people said, I don't agree with you, but I'm really glad to see you here. And they pressured him all week long to endorse Donald Trump. And if you don't get in line, you're pushed out or you're called a rhino. And that's the thing. I know it happened to Senator Tester, too, when he was in office, that if he didn't step in line with the Democrats on every single thing, some of his base would get really mad. And we need to look at that on both sides and say, we all have individual opinions. We all have individual belief systems. It doesn't just have to be what the party says.
But I will say this. I don't think that's bad. I think if you make a decision and people have challenged that decision, I think that's part of democracy. I think
That's what I'm saying.
That's part of the deal. And
Yep.
Democrats didn't push me out because I was the equivalent of a rhino on the Democratic side or because I was centrist. Make no mistake about it. We got all the Democrats voted in the state of Montana. It was, the other side just got too big. What can I say? They had more votes than I did.
Somebody said the following. They said, somebody way smarter than me, and I wish I could do the proper attribution. They said politicians, especially in DC, need to be reminded that that's not their seat. That's the people's seat.
100%.
And so when you are doing what is right for your constituents in your particular jurisdiction, I think that you may suffer the consequence for it, but I think that's what you're doing. Somebody in the comment section said lockstep GOP. They are lockstep GOP. And I think that's when, I think there's no secret sauce to this, but I do think that there's something to be examined when it comes to being some unity when it comes to the Democrats. But I think at the end of the day, you should be doing what's best for the people that have voted you into office, whatever that is, whether it's popular or not. And I think if people are kind of reminded of that on a regular basis in DC, then maybe it'll shift. And I also think that this is actually a time for opportunity, right? So I think also when things get really dire and really bad, it's an opportunity for new voices. Doesn't necessarily mean young. I want to be very clear. New does not mean young. New means new. It is an opportunity for new voices to step forward and kind of put their shoulder to the grindstone and kind of, join in the fight. But I do think that there is some value in youth, but that's not the cure-all for this. I get very wary when people are like, oh, it's got to be young. I'm like, no. youth does not necessarily equate to success when it comes to this.
So what I'm hearing, Marisa, is that Katie Phang's thinking about running for public office. That's what that's what I'm hearing.
We're going to
I'm
break
picking
some
it up.
news today.
I'm
We're going to
picking
break
it
some
up.
news today, Senator.
Yep. There'll be an announcement in the future. I can hear it.
Okay, so you talk. Katie. I know you texted me, but I was on this live. I don't know when you have to leave, so you just have to tell me when you have to leave.
I'm good for now.
But,
Totally
okay.
good for now.
But what is a lot? Do you think there's a lot? And I mean, do you think Iran might be a lie? Do you think the big beautiful bill might be a lie? Because we are seeing more pushback on those two things than I've seen on a lot of other issues.
I think Iran could end up being, don't quote me, right? It could be the straw that breaks the camel's back because there's been chipping away because of the big bullshit bill. And then I think, it's this whole, I think Caroline Leavitt did one of her stupid things about promises made, promises kept thing. And the thing is, Trump promised no foreign wars for us, right? Like Trump promised that we wouldn't do that. So let me get this straight. You can't even provide the basics for Americans, working families, especially in America, taking away Medicare, Medicaid, slashing federal jobs. And then now you're going to involve us in a war, which I said earlier this morning, if Trump had actually taken a stronger position on Ukraine, for example, there's a lot of stuff that's happening globally. And I always say our failure of imagination is not being able to consider how the United States still plays a role internationally. Because just because Trump wants to sit there and pretend like, everything is just for his own benefit, the reality is we should be paying attention to everything that's international. But we are distracted by the fact that domestically, he's running our country into the ground. And so I think Iran may end up being a very big Achilles heel for him. And I'm terrified because I could not imagine a worse combination of him, Hegseth, Marco Rubio, and Laura Loomer making decisions on behalf of the United States when it comes to this war. And I mentioned Laura Loomer because you and I both know that that's not a joke. She's the kind of person who has access to him. In fact, she probably has more access to Donald Trump about this issue with Israel than Tulsi Gabbard does.
Well, and that's the thing I keep thinking about is, she said, when people are critical of us entering, she said, well, this is his brand. America First is his brand. He gets to define it. Right? This is his messaging. But then he could have defined it over Ukraine. I mean, why are these senators all of a sudden backing this idea of getting into war with Iran when they said, we're not helping Ukraine, we're America First?
Well, because when it came to the issues with Israel and, Gaza, for example, right? It's now he's going to put a hotel in Gaza. I mean, it's all whatever can benefit him and his grip. So I literally think Trump got caught with his pants down on this one. I don't think that Netanyahu sat there and saw his counsel on this. And I think Netanyahu is a problem in and of himself. And I think that now Trump is like, oh shit, what do I do now? I don't want to look like I'm the weak guy in this, right? And I don't want to look like I don't have the power. And I had that piss poor attendance at my birthday party on Saturday and nobody came and nobody watched. And so now what do I got to do to look like I've got, you guys are too polite on this podcast for me to say what I want to say.
But you can say it.
Go ahead. I had an article written about me that said the guy that says fuck all the time in the U.S. Senate. So go ahead. You can say it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like he wants to look like he's like the big swinging dick in the room, right? That's his problem.
There we go.
Even though he doesn't have a big swinging dick.
How damn inappropriate. I'm just telling you, Katie.
I know. Some people are like, we love you, Katie, but you curse too much. I'm like, well, no, you guys don't spend enough time with Katie Phang to know that that's how I am.
What did you call him the other day? You called him I think you called him a douche canoe, which was, had me laughing.
Canoe. He's a douche canoe. I mean, and that's what I would call him to his face. But the thing is that terrifies me, that's the type of kind of, testosterone-driven, Pete Hegseth-y kind of shit, right? It's like, who's got the biggest dick in the room? Well, the problem is Trump doesn't. And so that's going to be an issue when it comes to a global, potentially nuclear conflict, is something like that. And so I feel like, though, that might be the thing that Americans say, wait, you're taking Marines and sending them to LA. Like I interviewed Congressman Jake Auchincloss yesterday, and he's a former Marine. And he's like, look, Katie, he's like, Marines are trained to escalate, not to de-escalate. But they're certainly not supposed to be sent to LA to deal with peaceful protesters, right? But then I think about, okay, well, then you are going to do what? You're going to take our Marines out of LA and send them where? To the Middle East to fight now? I mean, we warned that there may come a time where conscription comes back, when you got to draft. Because who the hell wants to send their kids to fight in the Middle East right now? Involuntarily. I don't know. I mean, it's a serious thing right now.
Who wants to go there voluntarily? I mean, holy shit. I mean, this thing could turn into be a real cluster. I'm telling you what. I mean, Russia, China, everybody's watching this stuff, and Trump might think that he's the only thing that the spotlight's on, but he's not. They're watching everything, and I think Bibi did this because his political career was going down the tubes, and he had to do something, and this is what he did: start dropping bombs over there. Truthfully,
I think that you are seeing an erosion in his support. And I think the question is, can we go back from the damage that's being wreaked right now and the havoc that's being wreaked? Because somebody said, just in the context of Doge, but it applies to Trump generally, the blast radius for somebody like Trump is so profound, and we don't even know the extent of the damage yet. The blast radius for somebody like him is so profound, and now we're literally going to be worrying about a blast radius.
But Katie, I honestly don't think we ever go back. I think this country and then is changed irreparably. Both our status in the world, the trust that other countries had for us. I just don't see how that happens. And the reason I say is because there was a first term, and all of our allies looked at that and said, well, it was just kind of the luck of the draw, and then it happened again. I just don't think that trust is ever gonna be put back in place.
I don't know. I still, call me naive, but I still have the optimism in the American spirit. And I think, again, that is another kind of American symbol that has been hijacked by the GOP to thinking that that's the only thing. The patriotism of this country doesn't just belong to the Republicans, it belongs to all of us. And I think especially the Democrats these days. I think that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the digging in of the heels of Democrats to remind Americans writ large that, and the world, that democracy is now becoming a decidedly democratic thing, big D, democratic thing. And so, I mean, I don't know. The one thing you could say about, like, 43, right? George W. Like, everybody, do you guys remember how everybody is like, oh my God, he was so stupid. Oh my God, he was such a nuclear strategery.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember nuclear strategery? I mean, people want to talk about that.
Will Ferrell, I mean, that was the whole thing. He was on Saturday Night Live every week making fun of George W.
But listen, George W., his dad, I mean, you name it, like, they actually had people around them, and Democrats too, right? Obama, Clinton, whomever, like, had people around them that it was like the rising tide lifts all ships kind of thing, right? It's, you had the collective knowledge and intelligence and sanity. But the problem is Trump, because he kind of got this blank check to put crazy, stupid, and incompetent around him. That's what freaks me out the most. Trump does damage all on his own, but Trump, coupled with the Pete Hegseths and such, like the Pam Bondis and stuff, like, that's some bad shit. If you really think about it, there is no adult in that room. Who's the adult in that room? I can't point to a single person right now that has a cabinet level position or otherwise that's an adult in that room, and that's the part that worries me the most.
Okay. I want to ask a quick question. First of all, though, I've seen a lot of comments here, and I haven't seen one that says swear less. So, Senator, they definitely want more F word from John Tester. That is a unanimous decision here from our viewers. But I do want to ask about Doge. I mean, the thing is, like, we know this is the strategy, right? To just throw as much at the American people, at journalists, as they possibly can so that we can't possibly keep up. We know that. Well, guess what? Guess whose name I haven't heard a lot this week? That's Elon Musk and Doge and all of that. And I did have a friend send me this long question about Doge and our data. I mean, we talk about these actual real threats and fears over Iran, but there's also real digital threats and real digital fears here. And he was asking me, we know the Supreme Court allowed Doge to access Social Security data while these lawsuits work their way through the system. But what about our data that's already been accessed? Like, do we have legal options as United States citizens to stop that, even if that access is taken away? Like, how do we put the toothpaste back in the tube?
So the first part of that is, how do we even know what has been accessed? Like, truly, because we don't know. We do have whistleblowers that have come forward, and that process is developing and evolving. We do have some litigation, obviously, that has gone through, and sadly, the Supreme Court's like, yeah, sure, Doge, you can access people's Social Security information, not a problem. I don't know if we're ever really going to know the full extent of the access. We also have this Trump administration that decided that cybersecurity really wasn't a priority anymore either, domestically or internationally. So they've withdrawn funding for cybersecurity. I've always believed that the Elon Musk component of all of this was, one, yes, Elon got rewarded for getting Trump into office. But two, Elon, it wasn't so much getting access to our bank accounts so they could like rape and pillage our bank accounts. That's not what it was. It was getting the personal data information for voter rolls. I think that Elon Musk wanted to get all of our personal data information for purposes of being able to influence future elections. He saw that being a kingmaker often is the ability to put somebody into an office like the president of the United States, right? And the kingmakers are the people that can influence elections and outcomes. And I think that he wanted to be able to get all of the personal information so that he could compile a huge database of voters. Listen, both parties, Democrats and Republicans, they pay a lot of money to be able to get voter information. When you run for office, that is invaluable, and yet it's got a dollar tag on it. So I think Elon Musk wanted all of that. I think it's the data compilation, but not, again, to be able to go and wipe out your bank account. I don't think that was the plan. I think that on its face was just so egregiously obvious. I think it's more along the lines of, how can I figure out how I can use that information to figure out who you can vote for and how you would vote, et cetera. That's what I think happened with him, which is why when he got his information, he was like, peace out. He's like, I don't have to stay here anymore. He's like, but I think your point, though, that is exceptionally well taken, is we aren't talking about Doge right now. We're not talking about Elon Musk. And it's almost like we should create our own network, maybe, Senator and Marie said. Maybe what we should be doing is, maybe we should have like one person who only focuses on Doge and one person who only focuses on Medicaid and Medicare and other social benefits, and one person who only focuses on our court system. I mean, like something like that, I think would be a great service as well, because we can't cover all of it.
Count me in. Count me absolutely in. I think, I struggle with this. How do we possibly cover everything? You can't. You just can't.
But the key is what was brought up at the very beginning of this, and it's what you do so very well, Katie, is that it has to be very, very concise and very short, because there's so much shit hitting against the wall that what are you gonna choose? I mean, truthfully. So if you're gonna hit everything that's going on every day, and we talk about this a lot, by the way, and I'm sure you deal with it every day too. I mean, there's so much stuff you can't cover it all in. You can't cover it all in an hour, even if it's a 1 minute blurb. So, yeah.
Sure.
No,
so
you're not going to run for public office. You're going to set up another news organization.
A media empire. She's setting up a media empire, and I think she just invited us to be part of it. I think.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
You guys are always welcome. I'd love to hang, especially with fellow profanity lovers. It's totally fun.
Well, we need to get you out to Montana. I just want to end by asking you, we really try to on our show give people a path forward, and people feel so overwhelmed and fatigued by everything. Like, how do you stay motivated? How do you stay hopeful, Katie?
I look at my family. I look at my loved ones. I look at my friends. I look at my community, and they always constantly remind me that this is the fight that we have to fight. I mean, my daughter is 10, and I never want her to look back and be like, "What the hell were you doing when it all went to shit?" I want to be on the right side of history for this one. And I want her to know, my mom's 82. Like, I don't want her to get dicked over either by what's happening with this government, right? Like, there are things that I want to make sure happen. And no matter how Sisyphus, I always say, you feel like Sisyphus, you're rolling the boulder up the hill every day and it rolls back down. No matter how much I feel like Sisyphus sometimes, it's just too important. It's too important. And if I have the ability, because of my legal training, my legal experience, and my media training and my media experience, to be able to make a difference, then I'll do it. But I also want to tell people that your contribution to the fight doesn't have to be, like I said a few minutes ago, you don't have to go out and protest in the street. Just sit down at your local coffee shop and have a conversation, like the senator said, maybe with people that may not be of your ilk. Just sit down and figure out what works. Write a postcard. I don't know. Do a phone bank. Do a coffee club, and also be more dialed in. Democracy and politics is very local. Be more dialed in into your municipal, your city, your state, your local politics. Because for somebody like me in Florida, a decidedly red state now, the bullshit somebody telling me it's purple is ridiculous. There's a lot that influences my day-to-day life from local politics. So people need to be more dialed in on that. There was some idea that suddenly politics was a federal thing. Yeah, it's federal. But I mean, come on, people. What happens with your school board influences you if you've got a kid sometimes more so than what happens in Washington, D.C. So people need to be dialed in locally. And I also tell people to run for office. I tell people that even if you feel like you're in a place where you're going to lose, you should run for office. Why? Because the difference is made, because it gives you the chance to have the platform to speak out and to talk about what's happening. And I do think that sometimes just being able to bend somebody's ear makes a difference. And so that's kind of my parting words for you guys.
So I'm just going to leave you with this, Katie. I served in the U.S. Senate for 18 years. I served in the state legislature for 8 years. I served on a school board for 9 years.
There you go.
I served in all these different capacities, and I think you could win as a Democrat in a purple state like Florida.
You guys saying it's purple? Jesus, not purple.
Okay,
we're working on it.
I'm giving it a break. So I'll make it. I think you could win as a Democrat in a deep, deep, deep red state like Florida.
Oh.
I don't know about that, but it doesn't mean that I wouldn't put my hat in, though. That's the thing, right? That's what I want people to know. We cannot be defeatist about this. We cannot be defeatist.
Absolutely correct.
That is when they win. They win when they think that they've intimidated us and cowed us into submission. And you just kind of have to believe, because that's really when they win, right? When we don't have faith anymore, that's when they win.
This could be a Buttigieg Fang primary.
Oh.
My God. The Republicans' head would fucking explode with a gay man and an Asian fucking woman. They would lose their fucking minds. Oh my God. You know what? That alone would be worth it just to see their heads fucking explode. And by the way, we both went to what do they call us? Elitist schools? Is that what they say? They say we're elitist, right? So
when I was watching news radio in the 90s, I never thought the guy who played the maintenance man would have the reach he had. So let's not count anything out. Joe Rogan has, he's turned out to be a very big influencer. So why not Katie Phang for office?
But didn't Joe Rogan eat like bugs and stuff? Didn't he do that
that's
show?
Right. He was on Fear Factor. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not eating bugs. Radio.
I'm not eating bugs. I draw the line at eating bugs. That ain't going to happen.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Katie, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Love it.
Appreciate
Bye, guys. Bye, everybody.
Come see us soon. Soon.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Okay. So let's wrap this up, Senator. What a conversation that was. Definitely our most profanity laced, but people seem to like it.
Well, it's good. I just want to say one thing. I think that she's absolutely right. This democracy can be stronger if people's voices are heard. But I also think it's going to take generations to rebuild relationships like we had with our NATO allies, with Canada, with Mexico, with a lot of countries around the world. I just don't think you just don't do what he has done to our best friends in the world and expect them just to say, all's forgotten, all's forgiven. We're back. That's the first thing I want to say. The other thing I want to say is that, you've got to love a person who just tells it like it is, and she tells it like it is, and
He does.
appreciate that.
I'm telling you, her videos are hilarious. I laugh out loud at her Instagram videos quite frequently. They're hilarious.
Well, that's cool. That's good stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way,
this is
one other thing. If you'd have wanted to see some profanities, you should have been with me yesterday afternoon. I don't know if you can see that, but yeah,
what happened?
It's a result of a high lift jack that I got in a fight with, and there was some profanity spoke after that. Yes, there was.
How long was that rant? How many minutes did that go on?
A while, until the blood got into my eyes, and then it got the sting in it. So, hey, it's the way it goes.
I gotta tell you, so in case for people who are joining us who didn't know this, I'm Maritza. This is former Senator John Tester. We have this show called Grounded, and I've heard a lot of people question if you're actually a farmer, Senator.
No,
but
never.
But he's posted some videos on our Substack channel and sent me videos, and we're getting an education in farming. I have learned so much about farming since
the first education we got was that Maritza found out the difference between a swather and a tractor. That was the first, that was good. Yeah.
I'm confused though. Is the swather is run by the tractor, right?
No.
They're separate machines.
They're still, in fact, there still is full-time swathers, but no, this is a separate machine. It's got its own little motor and
okay,
all that stuff. So yeah.
Okay, so some housekeeping stuff. Next week we have Senator Alyssa Slotkin on with us. That's going to be on our podcast, and then later in the week we are going to do a live broadcast with and Citizens United. And we are going to talk all about campaign finance. And in fact, we are also going to add in former Governor Mark Roscoe of Montana, longtime Republican who actually led the RNC at one point. And we are going to have him on because he and you are getting behind this measure in the state of Montana to do its own version of End Citizens United, basically. So we're going to talk all about that next week, and we hope you'll join us. I had something else. I need to ask you about your hat. I think I can read it. I think it says something about the Postal Service.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, let me see it. Yeah, it's U.S.
United
Postal
States.
Rural carriers, baby. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I just had to give a nod to the Postal Service today. I don't know. I was thinking about them. So,
they've been through a lot.
It's in the Constitution. They need to be there. It's really important. And they're a good outfit. So,
all right. Well, we've kept everyone long enough. Thank you so much for being with us today. As always, we would love to hear from you. You can send us a message here on Substack. You can find us on Blue Sky, on Instagram. You can shoot us an email at groundedpcast@gmail.com. This only works because of you guys and this community that we are building. And we are just so excited you're here with us. So thanks to Katie Phang. Thanks to Pearl Jam for letting us use their music in the podcast version of our show, and all of you guys for joining us today. Thank you.
Have a great day. Tally ho.
Don't get hurt, Senator. You stay safe today. Don't get in another fight with farm equipment, okay?
I'll try not to.
All right. Bye, guys.